Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast. Thank you for joining us on our weekly recap. Rudy, it happened. I knew it was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen like this. suffered its first loss. Where do we begin?
Kind of had a feeling this was going to be a bad day when the first couple of like replays for targeting started happening when it didn't feel like there was targeting at all. It's like, wow, this kind
Yeah.
of feels like last year, like when you're having momentum and you just get everything stopped by reviews that make no sense. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start wherever you want because there's a lot to dissect, a lot to unpack from that. There's kind of
Yeah.
two big takeaways for me. So, wherever you want to start, I'm happy starting.
I think it's good. We just admit, our feelings, let them out. Let's clear the space. This hurts. This is a
Yeah.
brutal, brutal loss on multiple levels. It's not just our first loss. It's not that it's in a spot in the season where we can't kind of like, if this was before the Louisville game, and we suffered this loss, I think we could still make it up and look better in a lot of the pollsters' eyes and in the committee's eyes getting that W, against Louisville. So I think it's first good that we acknowledge this hurts. This sucks. Season's not over. There's still a lot of football in front of us. A lot of crazy things can happen in the month of November. If you follow college football at all, you know that is the truth. No matter what the schedule looks like, things like this. I mean, it was a chaotic weekend across the board. I think for a lot of teams. So not just for us, but I want to start in the most glaring part. This was bound to happen. If you've been following all season, has been playing with fire. We've been flirting with these comebacks and these losses, and you can only do this for so long until it nips you in the butt. It's gonna hit you, it's gonna bite, and it's gonna sting. Pun intended, playing the Yellow Jackets. But I think we just went too many games where we are trying to come back, and they got us. As simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like there's two themes here. I'll start defensively and say it. Yeah, you're susceptible. Your secondary has issues, but the glaring issue to me is like we've been critical all year.
Yeah.
Not as critical because the team keeps winning and because the defense were making stops when they kind of absolutely needed to. And granted, they only gave up 28 points in this game, but it was a very ugly 28 points that they gave up in terms of how
I'm
they played and just like the lack of lining up to even know like what personnel is on the field to me is the biggest problem
I mean,
because
I'm
everything
going
starts how
back.
you line up.
And I'm going back to our show notes from this past Friday or last Friday, what we were talking about before the game. I even said Georgia Tech's only averaging 23.8 and they're only allowing 24.4. They played their game. They played the game that they were built for. And what sucks is I do definitely want to say it is our defense that basically lost us this game, and it is what it is. There were massive gashes. They kept extending these drives through these third plays. Where do I have it? 9 for 14 on third down. Unacceptable. Just
And
it's
that's because they were winning second down too, because a lot of those third downs are like third and two, third and one. So you
yeah,
can't you can't give up that long second down play, which is what happened over and over again to sustain those drives. And again, a lot of it is just X's and O's football. It's stuff
yeah.
that as long as you're lined up properly, you're gonna be able to stop that. Like this is the thing about the ACC that just drives me absolutely insane is that it's such a gimmicky league in terms of you're playing somebody different every week that necessarily doesn't play like, straight up football. It's always like going to be something goofy, something weird in there. And
Yeah.
because your play is also inconsistent and your officiating is inconsistent, you don't know what to expect. So, as much as Georgia Tech played their game, they were also allowed to play their game in terms of
They
how to
were,
win.
but I mean, again, on the defensive side, I don't know what Gidry's doing. I don't again, and I don't want to speak ahead because I'm nowhere near this man's stratosphere and his knowledge of the defensive side of football. But I know that if you keep getting a ticket because you're driving 55 and a 35, you need to drop your speed limit, right? Like that's just you don't need to know the mechanics where the sign is, things like that. But you just know if you're in this area and you're going over the speed limit, you need to slow down. And it is the exact same thing on our defense. How many episodes? I should genuinely go back when we review the next game and see how many
Yeah.
times I'm like jet sweeps, waggles, throws to the flat. Like why are all these outside zone runs gutting us? Like, and that's the thing. We have Jason Taylor, we have Tyler Barron, we've got Ruben Bain, we've got studs and we've got coaches who are sound in their disciplines and in that area, but we cannot lock down those edges. And I'm not understanding where that's coming from.
Yeah, like when you have great talent and great coaches, the thing that is so glaring to me is that they're constantly out of position. And it's like it's really it's the most it's defense 101 because
Yeah,
they're
I,
not
I think
setting the
but
edge. There's no
it's
edge
not
to
even
set.
and I think it's only half that. And follow me with this because if you go back and you rewatch the condensed game or the highlights, or if you're able to catch the whole game, again, if you're a UM fan, I wouldn't do that. But if you watch, there are plays like especially the jet sweeps and the motion. And again, I said this. I think I want to say this was FSU. But there was a game in the last couple of weeks, last 2 or 3 weeks, where I said there was a motion. And as or no, it's a Duke game. When you're watching a team, it's like they set the motion and they're gonna cross the other way in a pass. This was the same thing, but with the run. It was a motion with the wide receiver, and then wherever the wide receiver was motioning, that's where they were running. And to me, it's like I don't understand where I guess you can say they're maybe I think it's more of a scheme thing to be honest with you because if you see a guy in motion then you got to go okay you over there you got to check him down and set the edge on that whether it's a cornerback whoever it is and then I'll come up top as a middle linebacker or as an outside linebacker. I know that's not the most ideal coverage but you know they're not going to throw it. And not only that, but you know they're only going to throw it when they have Filio in, and then they're going to run it when Haynes King is in, because Haynes King's arm is broken pretty much. His shoulder's broken. He wasn't going to throw. There was no way, there was no parallel universe where Haynes King was going to come into this game and throw the ball. So if you see him, number 10, you see him on the field, they're going to run it. And they gutted us every single time. Even that final drive where you're just like, okay, guys, like, let's get the ball back. Whoop,
Yeah.
whoop.
And you're supposed to, like, when you set the edge, you're supposed to meet them at the point of attack outside. You're trying to force them back in because
In,
that's when your
exactly.
backside pursuit, that cutback, that's supposed to be where the hit happens. That's where the tackle happens. But they kept giving them the outside
Yeah,
instead
and
of
I
like a player that's about to meet him. They're not continuously going outside. They're giving him the space to go outside.
and
There's
the
a
thing
couple
to
things
me,
to it. Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would say equipment wise, like I want to know too. Was that like artificial turf like sprayed before the game? Was there like crazy humidity, like dew or something like that? Because our guys were slipping all over the place from an equipment perspective. I don't think they had it right. And then also just positioning wise, they're very flat footed. Like there's moments where like the guy's right there and it feels like that it felt like the game was being played in slow motion and that our guys just have zero speed. And that's something that I haven't been able to say about a Miami defense in a very long time.
Yeah, there's something, and it's funny you highlight upon this is a different defense than what we've seen in years past. And I go back and I think about my wife was asking me randomly because she obviously knows that my mood was going with the game, and she was like, "Is Georgia Tech good?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." She's
No.
like, "Then why are we losing?" And I'm like, I don't have an answer for that. And then that got me thinking about our defense because I, I don't want to lie. Yes, the defense is a lot of our problems because they couldn't get off the field. Our offense did not help at all. And if we really want to narrow it down and say, okay, whose fault is it really? Realistically, it's our offense's fault because I'm going back even in my show notes right now and I go, Georgia Tech needs to score 35 if they want to beat us. They didn't have to. Why didn't they have to? Because our offense couldn't even score 35, which our offense should be doing with its eyes closed. And we'll go back to defense in a minute because I do want to highlight and I want to put a pin in that statement. We're comparing off the defense this year compared to years past, and even through tumultuous years where you look at the Al Golden years, you look at the Mark Richt, the Manny Diaz years, still questionable teams. Not I would say competitive teams, but still sound defense. Defense was still pretty sound. We weren't. It's, I mean, besides Golden's years where we lost to Clemson and got blown out, which got him fired. But what I'm saying is like we would play Georgia Tech pretty well. You know what I mean? It's like there weren't years where we were watching teams and we were like, oh, we should easily be beating this team, and then our defense was giving a game up. There's something different about the defense this year where you approach a game and it's the opposite. It's our offense has got us. We're Gucci. Offense has got us. And years past, it was Offense is a little shaky. QB's a little meh. Weapons are okay. But our defense, they'll keep us in the game. The turnover train, that whole campaign, like those were all based on a stout, decent defense. Our defense is completely gone. But that said, and put to the side now, I don't even know you to go over that anymore. Our offense was abysmal. And I'm beginning to wonder, not questioning Mario's, you know, acumen, but I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a ego thing going on with Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal, because Cam Ward was super heated in the FSU game. We were kicking field goals. Same thing with Duke, and you could see that. This game, no field goals. No field goals, really. And there were two drives in particular in the first half where we could have definitely gotten 3 points on one, possibly gotten 3 points going into the half. That last drive going into the half, right? And so I wonder if we would have just taken it, as opposed to going for it on fourth, taken the 3 points, gotten 13-14, right? Gotten the ball back with like less than 2 minutes before the half, maybe gotten to a point to where we had given Borregales a 48, 52-yard field goal attempt, to end the half, maybe gone up 16-14. Would that have given us a different game in the second half, do you think?
I don't know, because the problem with the field goal, options, like, yeah, if Miami took the points every time they had an opportunity, and let's say they converted every single one of those, they'd probably win that game. But I think the way that that game played out, there was such a concern about leaving the defense out there on the field for so long that the offense almost is like they have to go for it on fourth down so often because they needed to get touchdowns out of it. Because
Yeah.
look, the defense gave up 28, and yeah, it could have been a lot worse in terms of a point differential. But when you're watching that game in real time, you feel like if you punt this ball away, you might as well just kiss another 7 points goodbye. That's going to be, that's going to be growing that lead of Georgia Tech's. So that's
Yeah, but you
where, yeah,
but you go
that's
back,
where I get nervous.
but you go back, right? Let's look at the last couple of games. Cal. Well, let's just start at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech gets 34. Cal gets 38. Louisville gets 45. We're not going to Florida State. That's a charity game. We don't count that. And Duke gets 31. Right? All
Hmm.
those teams scored more than Georgia Tech.
Hmm.
It was not a threat. My point in saying all of this is, and Duke's a little bit different, but Florida State, that's why I'm not including Florida State either, because their two scores were in garbage time and were random. But the rest of the teams that scored, it wasn't like a lot of their stuff was in garbage time. Specifically, Virginia Tech, Cal, Louisville, and Duke. Like those four games, they scored in regulation during regular drives, right? So it's not like we're not used to not only being down, but it's not like we're not used to teams scoring 28 plus. So that's why and I bring all this up because again, this is the note I took. I was like, there's a moment in the second quarter where Georgia Tech goes up 14-10. Then we get the ball, we drive down to the 23, and it's 4th and 3. And we could have taken the field goal there, been down by one. We could have ended up holding them like we did, get the ball back with the minute and change, and could have maybe gotten a second field goal. That takes us into halftime. We're now up 16-14 at the half, right? Then there's a with 11 minutes and 22 seconds in the third, right? So we're going now after halftime. There's a 4th and 1 play that you draw up a pass. Why are we not handing it? Why are we not passing like a quick shuffle pass or a quick? Why are we doing that pass, like that waggle pass out to Fletcher? I get it. Like the play was decent, but why are you not running it? Like when I talk about questionable coaching, I'm like, this is the stuff I'm talking about, because these are the little shifts in the game where it's 16-14. You're not letting them get the 21 to 10. You know what I mean? That inspires teams.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this team that's below this team, but it helps anyone, right? When you keep it like that. And so it was very weird to me for us to leave, and they're not traditional way of leaving points, but it almost felt unnatural for Mario. Like it almost felt like he was like, I need to do this for Cam. And I'm not blaming Cam. Like I don't want it to sound like, oh, like Cam's a problem, but I do think this is an issue when you think of dynamics in a locker room, because we're going to talk about a little bit more about the game, but I kind of also want to transition into where do we go for the rest of the season? How does this look for the college
Yeah.
football playoff? And we have to point the elephant out in the room. where does the chemistry in the locker room go from here?
Yeah, well,
Because
it's the
this team
play.
has not lost. Remember, this team
No,
has not lost. This team has
yeah,
faced adversity but conquered it. What do they do when they face adversity and they lose?
yeah, it's the play calling though in this current situation more than the decision to go on fourth down. Because like you said about the passes, like, hey, that fourth down that went to Fletcher, Elijah Lofton's wide open.
Yeah,
And he opens early on that. So it's like it looks good if it works, but yeah, short yardage situations, you should be able to just hand that ball off and get the first down because that's what they've been doing all year. That's why you get that third and short to make it work.
correct.
I didn't disagree with the decisions to go for it on fourth down. I think from a coaching perspective, time management, all of that. I think they did mostly the right things based on how this team has performed. There's just elements of this offense that when they're clicking, it's great, but there's clearly there was a lack of focus and execution offensively as
Yeah,
well this game that just sucked. Like there's these checkdowns that get dropped. So now Cam's thinking to himself, he's like, well, if they're dropping the check down, I'm not going to the check down. So now there's too many. So now he's taking sacks because every route is at least 15 yards downfield. So nobody's going to get open that quickly. Where Miami kind of got away from their offensive success is when they were starting to go empty. Because if you look, even late in the game, when
yeah,
Restrepo had that other great touchdown, when you have a running back that's in max protect that can block, that's how it's going to help spring those guys open. That's how Restrepo got open because Damian Martinez had an amazing kick out block on a free hitter that was coming through. So that's the kind of stuff that Miami's done really well throughout the season. It's like they go away from it for too long in terms of how they're going to convert their third downs. And look, I'll as much as I'll give Georgia Tech some credit, I'm also going to throw a lot of this to say like I'm sick of the criticism of like Miami needs the refs to bail them out, but there also is a game of football that has to be played properly, and go back and find the replays. Tell me how many times you're going to find Miami receivers completely grabbed and stopped
oh
in their
yeah.
route 15 yards downfield. So
Well, I think
are
it
there
was that the Horton one where like you
the
could see his
Horton
like
one?
shoulder, yeah, like his shoulder pad is
But there's
completely
multiple.
out. Yeah, yeah. There were
Horton, George,
the officiating was
Restrepo,
horrible. Yeah,
Horton, George, like you name it. Like you pick a player, they all had it at one point in time. So for me, it's like there's at least 17, 21 points off the board because of what should have been called either defensive holding or pass interference. Multiple of those. So I don't want to give too much. I don't want to take too much away from the offense. Yeah, they needed to convert some more fourth downs. They still had a chance to win that game. They came up short because they were just forcing it. But this is the stuff that frustrates me about the ACC because it's such inconsistent play in terms of all right, well, we're trying to win this game, but last I checked, I don't think our defensive backs will get away with doing that. So
yeah.
how are you going to
I
stop it?
but we also have to point out the other elephant in the room. Something's off with Cam. I don't know what it is. It started in the FSU game, but he gets out. He gets a little out of. I mean, because again, this is the weird thing about Cam too. If you watch the game from an eye level, he looks very human, especially the last since FSU, Duke, like these games he's looked very human. Whereas beginning of the season, superhuman. You're like, oh, what the heck is this guy doing? Statistically, phenomenal. Like if I told you Cam Ward had a suspect game, you'd be like, what do you mean? He got over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's great. No interceptions. What do you mean? No, you watch this game going back to that fourth down in the third quarter. It's fresh in the third quarter. That's an easy give me to Fletcher. That's a layup, and it fell short. There was another
Mhm.
one. Again, I get it. He was dancing around the pocket, nearly got sacked twice, and he goes to throw to Restrepo, who doesn't, but it's super short of Restrepo. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, like you expect this guy to be perfect. No, I've just seen what he's done before,
Yeah,
right? And I've seen him make even crazier throws and get it. But there seems to be a little. Have you been noticing this? I don't want to say decline, but he seems to be a little bit out of rhythm with his receivers the last couple of games. Or am I
a
just seeing
little
something completely different?
a little out of rhythm, but also the footing was just difficult to find. And again, I'm going back to the playing surface on that one because there's plays that he makes in previous weeks where he either jukes somebody or he sets his feet properly, and I'm watching him like move around in the pocket, and it's sloppy because he's slipping all over the place. So for me, again, it's wondering, okay, what's the footing issue that's happening with this surface? He wasn't doing that before, so that's where I get again, this is where I get a little suspect in terms of how this game was played out. Back in the day when you play like BYU and lose because they grow the grass like up to ankle deep and then wet it the night before so that it's super slow. Kind of a similar situation with this, but with artificial turf. So there's something about it that just didn't sit right. And I don't know if it's so much a chemistry issue between the receivers as much of it's just like an overall unit chemistry that's missing here because I I understand the ability, like the need to diversify your formations and your play sets, but there's another advantage to having a running back in pass protect with you. And for Cam specifically, it's another outlet to get rid of the ball. So instead of just dancing around trying to find somebody open, he's got someone to flip to if he has to. And that's what
Well,
worked really well in previous years or previous games.
yeah, yeah, but I think he utilized that to a certain extent here too. I think there were a few pitches that and little tosses that he was able to get out of the pocket and get make sure that we didn't completely get sacked. Again, the problem is no everyone knows you're either going to pass it or you're going to run it as a QB sneak because Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher only got 88 yards, which you look at the other side of the field, which we let's give Georgia Tech their flowers. I mean, 271 yards. They 2/3 of the game they had the possession of the ball. I mean, they controlled the whole thing, and that's what it is. Like that's they that. How do you stifle a like ridiculously fast and explosive offense? You keep them off the field, and that's exactly what Georgia Tech did. And kudos to them. I wish we had a better way, a better game plan to get out of those things, like you said, where maybe you drop, you keep Fletcher back, you keep Martinez back for that when you recognize the blitz, and then you shoot them out for the flat for the check down just in case. But it just seemed like I don't know. I felt like the game plan in this game was a little off. I almost as if it was let's just see what happens and we'll go from there. I didn't notice a specific point of attack against the Georgia Tech defense because whatever Georgia Tech wanted to do, they did in terms of the defense
Yep.
side of the ball. When they wanted to blitz, they had penetration. When they wanted to cover, they had our wide receivers on lockdown. I did not see from an offensive perspective a point of attack. I did not see a point to have spirit. Did you?
Yeah, no, this is I agree with you there because part of this game it felt like Miami was trying to also grind out the game with Georgia Tech and keep it low scoring from the sense of just trying to like rest Miami's defense. But
Yeah.
I also don't think that Miami necessarily can afford to do that because they have to get into shootouts with teams. If
Yeah.
your defense gets gassed, so be it, because you need that offense to hum and work, very quickly. That's the best way that they're going to put up points. And because this game was so slow, and because Miami was trying to match that pace and try to be physical too, I think that's what takes them out of their game. Because if it is low scoring, and if you're trying to fight for time of possession, you're not going to be able to get in a rhythm. You're not going to be able to exploit what your defense is doing. I think Miami can work. What they need to do is go back to working with a lead. And yeah, it sucks that probably our best example of trying to do that was Louisville, where we went up like 21 and then the lead erased in no time. But that is the style that Miami needs to try to enforce and impose on teams every single game. And it didn't seem like they wanted to do that. It felt like they were happy exchanging drives and just taking time off the clock. Where look, Miami needs more repetitions to do that. They need more series. They need more possessions, and uh, that's where this goes wrong.
Yeah, it feels like almost like at this juncture in the season, if you were to like kind of extrapolate and kind of look at it like as a game, as the whole season as a game, I felt like we were up by 2 or 3 touchdowns, like kind of like what Cal did to us, right? They were up, they were feeling themselves, they were good, and they kind of let their foot off the brake. And the second they let themselves off second they let their foot off the brake, we came in, we won the game. I think that's kind of what happened with this game. I feel like the coaching staff, the players, to a certain extent, they took their foot off the gas. And the, I was convinced with that throw to Elijah Arroyo. I was like, okay, like they scored fast. We answered just as fast. Here we go. And then you just kind of just saw the game come to a grinding halt at that point. Like that was almost like not the full shift, because I feel like the real full shift was that moment in the second quarter I was talking about where we went for it on fourth down and we could have easily gotten those points and kept the game within one. Um, but you could just kind of slowly seeing the tide shift there. And I feel like my hope, JD Piquel was joking right after the game. He was like, this is the best thing for Miami. This is the greatest thing for these players because now they're going to be fired up. Now they're going to be ready. They needed to have, the adversity against them. And now they're going to be fired up and ready to go going into this bye week. There are two things that are glaring to me as we head into this bye week. One, we're going into a bye week. Yes, we broke the curse against, Virginia Tech coming out of our bye week earlier this year. We'll see how we do. My other thing is, how do we respond from this? Because we had a very similar situation in 2017, where I think we went 9-0, and we lost to Georgia Tech. I think it was. Was it Georgia Tech?
Pitt.
Or Pitt? And so it was Pitt. And the year was basically over. We lost our last 2 games. We lost our bowl game. It was an abysmal season. How do we avoid that, Rudy?
Yeah, they have to have a real moment with the team. It's another one of those kind of like player-led meetings to say we can't let this get away. Everything's still in front. So again, thank you so much to the University of Virginia Cavaliers for keeping
Yes.
Miami's like they control their own destiny to the ACC championship game if they win out. Everything's still in front of you. The point though is that they have to kind of get back to being a full team. And I think where, like, I think you were alluding to this earlier, is it a Cam Ward thing with the offense? At this point, it almost feels like it's like an offense versus defense thing where I think the offense has given up faith in the defense to execute. And you can't have that divide your locker room. And you need to play complementary football. And that's where they need to get back to work in terms of, to take a Mario Cristobal term, of just getting back to basic X's and O's. There are things that are easily fixable on this team, and they were recruited to play here. The accumulation of talent that's here is so much better than what the product looks like on the field in terms of how they're just basic execution. So yeah, the bye week came at a great time. Should help with some of the injuries. That secondary was injured a little bit. Remember, Jadis Richard is
Yeah.
out.
I saw him go. Yeah.
Damari
And our
Brown should
secondary is
hopefully be
very
back.
thin, super thin. We have a super
Yep.
thin secondary. We had not only a questionable secondary, but a super thin secondary. So it's
Yep.
insult to
Yeah,
injury.
Damari Brown should be back. Should be great. You'll have the entire. You're probably going to have a little bit of an issue on the defensive line too, because I don't think was it Ahmad Moten that was
Yeah, Moten. Yeah,
called for targeting there, so he'll
targeting.
be
Yeah.
out for like the first half of the game against Wake Forest. I
Which
think there's enough there.
let's transition to that real quick, because before we move on, we do have to just, again, the officiating is just, and people will sit there and be like, oh, well, you're giving so many calls. Yes, you can kind of
No, correct calls were made.
maybe
You were
you
given a correct
could,
call.
but
You were given a correct call. Like, that's the thing that I don't like about that narrative, is like you got calls. Like, no, we got the correct call. When the correct call is
exactly.
made, that's what
But
matters. That's
I'm
the
trying
thing.
to like remove my Homer hat out of this. But these
Yeah.
targeting calls were good football plays. Like there's no launching. And yes, in the first one, he wasn't called. We got away with it. No, it wasn't targeting. But even the second one, it's what is he supposed to do? Like wait for the guy to do his spin move, get set, and then go, hey, I'm here and I'm gonna tackle you right now. No, he's gonna, wherever that guy is, he's going to drive into them because he doesn't know if the guy's going to be facing him on his side, get him from the back. Who knows? He's just going to get a body, right? And the issue I have is it slows down the game. And now some critic might be saying, well, that's great for your defense because your defense really needs these timeouts and these. I don't think so either, because it
No.
gives it just slows the pace of the game. And good teams rarely like to go very slow, except for at the very end after they pulverize their teams. But most
Yep.
teams want to get off and get off fast, and they want to get going, and they want to keep the pedal to the floor. And then when it's like third quarter and you're already up by 4 possessions and you put your second stringers in, that's when they'll maybe ground and pounding and bleed the game out. But no one wants to see a slow game, and these targeting calls and these missed pass interference calls, and then these random like calls that we were getting, it just, again, I'm not blaming the refs because we should have played better, but it really doesn't help. And I'm really hoping after this season, something's done in terms of like, there's got to be a uniform group of refs that just does all of college football. Like the NFL doesn't have the AF. Do they have? I don't even know. I don't follow the
They have a
NFL.
union. They have like a union of officials, but I don't know if it's like an AFC versus NFC thing. I just know that they all fit under the same rules. They all under the same like one committee, and that's what's absolutely necessary. Because
Yeah. So like to
let's
me,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so like I just think, I mean, and this isn't just an ACC issue. This is across the board. There's just questionable officiating everywhere, and it's just like, let's just clean this up. Let's just not have this be an issue. Why are we doing this? We created instant replay so that we wouldn't have these kind of issues. Let's just create a union. Let's just create a uniform group of refs and officials to just do every game. Everyone has the same clear lines. Everyone has the clear expectations. Let's move on. But back to where we were talking about in the ACC, UM's future. Okay, we play Wake Forest. In my opinion, we need a blowout win. They're a terrible team. The reason why I say we need a blowout win is we need to show that we're not this struggling team, because if you look at the games and you look at the our last, we are trending downwards. Again, you can't really look at the Florida State game, but it's like we're letting them more teams score more points. We're playing more games where we have to come back like Duke, and then now we've lost a game. Wake Forest, if Wake Forest stays in this game, we may drop again in the rankings.
I can care less about the rankings as long as they win, because if you win, you're in the playoff. So for me, that means more than a ranking. It's more of just how you execute your game plan. And if they can go out there and make that game, win convincingly and fix your issues, that's all that really matters to me.
See,
Because
I thought that way. I thought that way after week one as well. And then remember, I was telling you, like when we were going over our playoffs things, I was like, "Did you notice there were 4 teams from here, 4 teams from there?" And and it's not like, in my opinion, it's not like the SEC that the second 2 teams are exponentially better than the top 2 teams of the
they're
ACC
not
or
they're
maybe
not
even
even
the Big
better than the
12.
top couple teams in another conference this year.
Right. So I picked up another thing too. I noticed that when you look at the rankings too, and this is why I say the rankings are matter. Because if we drop again, and let's just say we do win out, and we do win the ACC, remember, Boise State could still jump us. BYU is already ahead of us, so they'll get the 3 spot. We could lose and get the 5th spot, because remember, it's not the top 4 power conference teams get the 4 first bye
It
weeks.
is.
No, it's not. It's the
But
first 4 conference champions of all. So if you have a Boise State who's ranked higher than UM and they win the Mountain West, guess who gets a bye week? Boise
uh,
State, not
I
UM.
I don't
No,
know.
it's
I'm pretty.
look at it. Look at
I
it.
have to
That's
look
how
at it again. Then
it's how it
I have to
works.
look at it
And
again.
that's why I was saying that this is why the rankings matter to a certain extent. Because again, I think you're right. If we win out, so here's how I look at it. If we want to keep our 3 seed or even possibly a 4th seed, here are the 2 things I think need to happen. One, we absolutely have to win out and in good fashion. There's like this cannot be struggling against Wake Forest, can't be struggling against Syracuse. We can play a close game against SMU, but it needs to be all. In my opinion, I think it needs to be a definitive win, because I sat, especially with us losing now as opposed to in the conference championship, which I was the only other possibility I thought we would lose. There's not going to be 2 ACC teams in, so it's going to be
No.
us or SMU. It's
Yeah.
going to be us or SMU. So because of that, we need to win out completely, but then we also need a Colorado or whoever's going to represent the Big 12 to beat BYU. That's
Yeah.
the only way.
Makes sense.
Because, like I said, if right now we're at 12, according to the AP, and if the CFP follows that in any remote way, let's say the best case scenario is we end up 11. I don't think a win against Wake Forest, and I don't think a win against Syracuse is going to get us back into the top 10. Especially when you have teams like Texas A&M who can play Texas again and may very well win, and they can jump from a 12 or 13 spot to a top 10, and then Texas would only drop to an 8. Even if Indiana loses to Ohio State, I still think they can get in the top 10. Penn State's going to stay there. Notre Dame's going to stay there. Oregon's not going to lose. Um, Alabama's not going to lose. They're back into it. And we may even very well get an Alabama versus Texas. So Georgia may even very well stay in the top 10. So this is why I was saying these are the things you need to pay attention when you talk about rankings too. They don't technically, yes, matter, but if we are ranked low enough at like a 10 or 11 and BYU is still up there at 8 or 6, and then Boise State jumps us by any chance, forget it. We may be seed number 5, which again, they say is one of the more favorable spots, but it's not the bye week that we're looking for. What do you think?
It's not the bye week, but hey, if you get to host a first round at Hard Rock, getting in the playoff for me means more than having the bye. I'd rather just get in the playoff and win the conference and go from there. Hey, maybe this team needs a couple more reps, because even though they're let's say they're still a little banged up, but if there's extra reps that you need to, it's how you're going to be at the end of the year. It's kind of like the NFL now, where if you just get on a hot streak, that's what's going to help you out and carry you through the games. If Miami needs that to play their best football, so be it. I
Yeah,
mean,
my
that's
hope is we don't lose. We don't go back to like our old ways. We don't give up, because I still think there's a lot in front of us. I do though. I think, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory sense. I just you can read the room, you can read the country. I think Cam Ward is out of the Heisman race. I think he's completely done. Sadly, I don't think with that performance, last week's performance, it's not going to be enough. No one's going to care that he puts up 400 yards, 500 yards against Wake Forest or Syracuse. They're not going to care. So that's out of the way. So what is he playing for? Um, we very well, again, we may not even get a bye week. So it's like, I hope that these players can recognize if they play out. I mean, we saw what happened to FSU last year. So nothing surprises me. We could still win out. We could still win it handily, still get that fifth seed. Because again, people don't respect us. They don't, that's everyone's gripe. Who have you played? Who have you played? Who have you played? And as much as we can argue and we can put things on paper, we can show people, they don't care. And the
Yeah.
committee does not care. The committee wants to see that you have beaten a ranked team. I guarantee you're going to see Alabama go. I think they were 13th last week. I guarantee you're going to see them go into the top five. Top five,
It's
top six.
possible. It's
I'm telling you,
possible. I
you're going
mean,
to see them. The fact that they destroyed LSU at home, broke that streak, all of the accolades you add on that, right? And as dominant as they looked, there's no way the committee is not going to keep. I would say the lowest they go is 7.
yeah,
Realistically, 7
I think
is
so.
where but I think they can go almost as high as anywhere between 5 and 7, just because they have such a hard on for Alabama and they love the fact that you beat a ranked team when LSU is their LSU is the UM of the SEC. Like they're a decent team, but like it's like they're doing comebacks. They're barely winning. Like it's not like they're handling teams, like Oregon. Like in Oregon is I mean, realistically now, I mean, I hate to say that. I think they're the only team that is for sure in the playoffs. When it comes to playoffs, I'm like, this is the only team I think will absolutely make the playoffs. Everyone else, there's so much chaos that can occur in the next couple of weeks. We'll see. But I'm praying our Canes can keep it together, stay focused, head into this bye week, get some rest, but then when Wake Forest comes to town in 2 weeks, handle business.
I'll say something kind of controversial.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Put one of those SEC teams in the ACC and let's see if they go undefeated. Not because the caliber of the teams are better, not because of the talent gap, because this
Hmm.
league is such a roller coaster. They will drop at least one game a year.
Yeah,
That's plain and simple. Because
I think
I think the way Alabama looked against Vandy is exactly the way that type of football is played in the ACC week in and week out. And because it's inconsistent and because you don't know what you're looking for or how the game is supposed to be played, I think they drop at least 1 or 2 games a year. So that's my only argument to any critics out there. Is like, good, join the conference, see if you could do it. Bet you can.
I'm with you, man. Well, on that note, we will wrap this up. We will see you guys on Friday for our preview, and maybe we'll go over some playoff predictions this next week since we have a bye. Rudy, hope you have a great remainder to your weekend and have a great week.
You too, man. I'll see you on Friday. And hey, we get to watch football casually the entire weekend, which is kind of welcome on this side.
I don't want to watch any football anymore. No, we love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Click like, comment, and subscribe. We thank all of you for staying this long and watching our recap. We'll see you guys on Friday. Take care.